I have to know how it ends. That's one reason. G'day my lovelies, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about why I don't DNF a book. And for those who don't know, DNF is did not finish. This is a topic that I was inspired to talk about after watching a video by Johanna. Her channel is new to me, but I have become a fan. She is well spoken and articulate and thoughtful in her videos. And if you haven't checked her out, you definitely should. And I'll link her channel in my description box below together with the video that inspired this one. Before I begin, I want to preface this video by saying that there is no judgment, right or wrong, as to whether you DNF or don't DNF. When I first started my book channel, I noticed the acronym DNF everywhere, and I had no idea what it meant. I had to look it up, and I was surprised actually at how many people do DNF books, and regularly, not say a one-off. For me, it was never something that I did all that often. It was quite rare actually. Until the last 12 months, I would have said I have DNF perhaps 5 in all my life. Perhaps. Could be a few more, but not many. I feel once I reach a certain point, whether it's 20%, 30%, 40%, I feel I'm already into the book, I may as well finish it. And today I wanted to discuss why I don't like DNFing books, why sometimes I push through a book even though I'm not really enjoying it. And I put that down to several reasons why I feel the need to finish a book. One is that I'm a curious cat. I like to know how a book ends. I only once read the back of a book whilst I was still near the beginning and regretted it, and I have not done it since. It ruined the book for me because I knew how it was going to end. One of the things I do enjoy with some books is that anticipation, that impatience to find out what is going to happen. So that is definitely a strong reason for me to finish a book. Another reason is that I've never felt it was fair to an author to abandon the book in the middle. How am I possibly going to gauge whether the author succeeded in their aim if I have not read the entire book? Now, there are, of course, some exceptions to this. There are some books that are so poorly written that no, you don't need to get to the end to know it's a terrible book. But I've always felt this need to be fair to an author. And the only way I could be fair is by reading the whole thing and then assessing whether they succeeded or failed in what they were aiming for, whether it was worth reading or not. That, I would say, is my strongest reason for not DNFing a book. Some books can start very slowly, can be even boring to begin with, but if you give them time, they can develop a momentum that can really catch you unawares, and all of a sudden you are racing towards the end. The slow burn books. If we don't give them a little bit of time, we may not get to the great parts in a book or series. Another reason why I will finish a book even if I don't like it is because I bought it. And I feel, well, I've spent money on this book. I have to get my money's worth by reading the whole thing. And that is something I do quite often. Even when I'm not enjoying a book, I just feel guilty if I don't actually read it since I paid money for it. I wonder if others feel that, but I definitely feel it. Another reason for me to finish a book is so I can critically assess it. I don't feel I am really entitled to criticize a book if I haven't read the whole thing. And perhaps another reason why I don't like DNFing a book is I like to finish what I start. Always. Whether it's a book, a chore, a goal, a movie, a show, it is irrelevant. I have to finish it. I'm just one of these people who likes completeness, to know, yep, it's done. Even if I'm hating what I'm doing, I will continue until I have finished. But I don't think for me it is a sense of accomplishment that I have finished a book, even one that I'm disliking. For me, it is more, it's finished with. It's done. And I can move on to the next. But I also need to add that as I've gotten older, I've become much better at gauging, even before I start a book, as to whether it will be one I will enjoy or not. That doesn't mean there aren't misses. There are always going to be some, but it doesn't happen all that often. I can usually tell, even from the blurb, whether it is a book for me. Sometimes though, you need to read a little bit of a book to realize if it is for you or not. One of those was Sarah J. Maas's Throne of Glass. I had this book for 10 years. I was able to gauge just by the cover and by the blurb that it was unlikely this book was going to be for me. It wasn't because I had heard so much about Sarah J. Maas. That came much later. Now you might wonder, why did I buy this book? It was because a shop assistant in a bookshop highly recommended it. And back then I didn't even know YA was a thing. So I bought it based on their recommendation. But when I looked more closely after I got home, because I can be an impulsive buyer of books, I looked at the cover, I looked at the blurb, and I thought, I don't think this one is really for me. I've never enjoyed books about young teenagers. Not even when I was a teenager. I didn't know it was YA. But I had a sense that this was not going to be for me. And after reading only, 10 pages, I was vindicated in that view. So perhaps out of experience, out of many years' experience at choosing books, I've become very good at guessing which ones I'm going to like and which ones I'm not. So there are less books that I'm inclined to DNF. But as I pointed out earlier, that does not mean there aren't misses. There are always going to be misses, where you think you might love something and something will put you off a book. But I can read a book with bad writing, terrible plots, horrible characters, and still push through. So they are some of my reasons why I don't DNF many books. But that doesn't mean I don't at all. I will admit, prior to the last year or so, it happened extremely rarely. I can probably remember every single book that I DNF'd. One was Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I got halfway through, couldn't bear it, I was so bored, and I abandoned it. Another book was Cecilia Dart Thornton. I can't remember what the book is called. I think it is The Ill-Made Mute. Again, I got bored and I abandoned it halfway. However, both of these books in particular, I was reading at a time when I was getting very, very bored with fantasy, and I would start one thing and I couldn't get into it, so I'd start another. It was never my intention to not finish them. It was just a stage in my life where I really had stopped reading on a regular basis. But there were a couple of books that I definitely DNF'd and don't think I will ever be going back to. One is Moby Dick. Yeah, by Herman Melville. I tried that book so many times. I'd get to around 100 pages and I was bored out of my brain and I just could not bear to go further into the book. I must have tried at least 5 times, and in the end I decided it's just not for me. Now part of me feels like one day maybe I'll retry it. Part of me. The other part is like, oh God, no. But I will not rule it out. It is a possibility. I think for me, most books that I have DNF'd are not necessarily what are called hard DNFs, which means you have no intention of going back, as compared to soft DNFs. I didn't even know they were a thing, but apparently it is. Soft DNFs are books that you're not interested in continuing right now, but you might change your mind in the future. I have a few of those back in the past that I haven't completely given up on. One is Stephen Donaldson's Lord Fowl's Bane. This book was a recommendation by a very good friend of mine who had never steered me wrong with fantasy. But something this character did right at the beginning, I absolutely hated and found I couldn't read about him anymore. However, that was almost 30 years ago, and I actually do want to retry this book to see if I can get past that event that happened with this character. My attitude, however, towards DNFing has changed slightly in the last year, and partly because I've been influenced by my friend Jacqueline, who does DNF books, much more than I do. And one of her reasons I know is that why waste time reading a book I'm not enjoying when there are so many more out there that I need to try? And I have to agree with that, especially now that I have less years ahead of me than I've got behind me. I honestly feel like I need to live 1,000 years to be able to read all the books I want. So why waste time reading a book I'm not enjoying? So when do I DNF a book? If I'm bored. There are some books that you are bored out of your brain reading and it is an effort to continue. You read a few pages, you can't bear it, you put it aside, then try it again another time. If that continues to happen to me, I am much more inclined to DNF it. Another reason is if the book is in a genre or subgenre that I don't enjoy, like YA. Throwing a Glass would fall within this category. YA is not my cup of tea, and that one was clearly a romance rather than a fantasy, so there were 2 reasons for me to DNF that. A book that I found so boring I could not bear to finish it was the first Maisie Dobbs by, what's her name? Jacqueline Winspear. I really tried, and I think I read at least a third of that book, and we were coming up to a flashback about a tragic romance, and I could not stand it. I thought, I don't care, because I thought this was a murder mystery, and instead it is coming across as a romance, and I thought, yeah, that's not what I was reading it for. And that is a secondary reason why I gave up on that book. It wasn't what it was touted to be. So that is another reason I might give up on a book when I'm told it's one thing and it turns out to be something else. I do not like being deceived as to what a book is. I will actually get angry when I'm reading a book that is nothing like what I was led to believe. The Guest List by Lucy Foley is an example of that. Now, I did want to briefly mention something else that Johanna talked about in a video, about she felt that no book she finished was a waste of time, that she felt she gained something from it. I have to generally agree with that. However, there are some books that I feel don't teach me anything, but that I wasted my time reading them. There's always going to be books like that. Thankfully, as I've gotten older, that's happened less and less and less. But generally, there is something to take away from every book you finish. Something, whether positive or negative. For me, trying YA fantasy, such as the Grisha trilogy, I only read 1.5 books. That's another one I DNF'd because I discovered it really was not a genre I enjoyed. Do I regret reading some books? Sometimes, not often. With those books that I feel I really didn't enjoy, I do wonder why I bothered to push through and I didn't switch to something else that I would have liked more. I read, for example, Robinson Crusoe, which I hated. I won't deny it. And I kept pushing through because I thought it's a classic. I have seen so many references to this main character. I'd like to see what the book has to say about it. I did not feel it was worth it at the end. I really should have DNF'd that book because it was so repetitive and it just enraged me anyway. So I do regret the time I spent reading it, though I don't feel I got nothing out of it. I just learned that this author is definitely not for me, and just because something is a classic does not make it a good book. Yeah, I try to take something away from every book I read. I'm not always successful. Sometimes I have to dig really deep to feel I haven't wasted my time, but it also doesn't happen very often that I feel my time was wasted. In summary, I am still very reluctant to DNF books, but I'm trying to stop reading books that I'm really not enjoying at all, because I know there are so many other books out there that I may never get the time to read. So my age has definitely changed my attitude towards DNFing books. It will never make me a person who finds it easy to DNF a book, but if it's a book I'm really not enjoying, I am more inclined to stop reading it now. I wish sometimes that I was quicker to DNF certain books that I'm really not enjoying. Yeah, I do, but I just feel, no, I have to continue and see if it improves. Now, of course, I want to hear from you guys. Do you DNF books, or are you like me? I think the small minority who don't like DNFing books. And if you do DNF books, why do you DNF them? When do you do it? Do you do it very quickly? Do you do it after several chapters or a certain percentage? Do you have a cutoff, for example, in a book you're reading? Do you ever wonder, was it a mistake to DNF that book because you haven't read it all? And on the flip side, for those of you who don't DNF books, why do you push through a book that you are not enjoying? Because ultimately that's why we DNF books, because we're not enjoying them. You know, I would love to hear your thoughts, and you can put it down in the comments. Well, that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you very much for watching, and also thank you again to Johanna for inspiring this topic. And as usual, you can like, comment and subscribe if you haven't already. I also have a Patreon account if you wish to support me in that way. I hope you all have a beautiful day, and I'll see you next time. Bye!